Hello, you're listening to the Neil Lamptey Show. My name's Joey, and I'm joined this week by Paul.
All right, mate.
And Neil.
My boy.
And for the last time this season and ever, the outgoing Kieran Crowley.
Hi guys, great to be on, as always.
Let's see.
Final time. Totes a mush.
I think, yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's probably worth... There'll be some people out there that don't know what your current situation is. So do you want to give us an update on where you're at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm leaving the club after 5 seasons. I'm going to be joining the FAI, the Republic of Ireland national team, to do basically what I do for the football club. And so, yeah, I'm going to be leaving in the next 2 weeks to head over there. And it's quite a unbelievable situation, really, but it's very sad to be leaving. The club have absolutely grown to love and brought into my heart, so it's tough.
And a club that palpably has grown to love you, I would suggest, if you look at the reaction of the players on Twitter afterwards. That was nice, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was really nice, actually, and I didn't expect it at all, really, and I didn't expect like the reaction when I put it out, like to just everyone, really, because it was so nice. And then, like, after the Oldham game, we did the press with Tony, and then I thought Tony said, "Come into the dressing room for a bit." I thought there was some problem, and then all the players were there and presenting me with a shirt and asked me to do a speech, and it was really, really nice, trying to hold back the old tears there. Luckily, I didn't cry, because that would have taken away any masculinity I might have had. So yeah.
Very nice indeed. Let's kick off with moments of the week then. Paul, do you want to get going?
It's Biggie's pass with the outside of his right foot to Stephen Hunt, which I know is a bit niche if you weren't there. He played about a 30-yard pass with the outside of his right foot perfectly into the, not particularly fast-moving Stephen Hunt's path, but still directly into his path. And it was one of those times where there is definitely a footballer in Biggie, and it's a bit... Try not to be mean to him. It's almost like we had a really young pup who was really energetic. He got bought by someone who wanted him to be this glorious dog, and then treated him like shit for 3 years. And we've got him back, and he's still not quite come out of himself. He's still a bit shy and a bit nervous. But I thought on Saturday that and the Bradford games really showed to me that there is definitely a player there. He just needs someone who's going to love him, play him like 30, 40 games, except the fact that he might be dreadful in 10 of them. But
that's a lot of games.
That spell, there's definitely a player there.
Have you stolen my analogy?
Yeah, it's similar, isn't it? I've heard this one before.
Yeah, that's what I said last week.
I can't remember what happened last week. Oh, man.
It's an outrage.
But no, I just feel really sorry for the guy. I think he came in with big expectations. He then sort of got dropped from the squad, found himself either out of favour or just due to the loan number of loans we had. He sort of found himself out. And players like that we've always said it, players like that need games. And he's an effervescent player. I mean, the last time we was here, you could see he was really bubbly. Yesterday, he was one of the people who was really celebrating with Armstrong when he scored. You can tell he's keen to do well. And I just hope
you've cut off.
It just hopes.
It just hopes. Yeah, it's just a sort
he just can't have the games.
Oh, there we go. He's back.
I'm sure the bit in the middle was beautiful.
We lost you for a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying.
Cool.
Neil, moment of the week.
I have 2. One's a nice PC one, and one's an Allison special. So the first one, I just think Adam Armstrong getting 20 goals. Yeah. I think it's meaningful for any striker, isn't it? So just pleased that he finally got it, and clearly it meant a lot to everybody because there hasn't been much else to cheer. So yeah, lovely old job to him. The other one, after the game, I feel a little bit different about the season to most people, I think. No, I mean, 4 out of 5 wins kind of helped a lot of people get over some of the disappointment. But after the game, I saw a video from a Sheffield United fan of their end of season.
This is brilliant. Sorry.
Have you seen that one? Yeah. So basically, Sheffield United, who finished a win below us, there was a guy there with a perspective very similar to my own, giving quite a bit of grief. To be honest, it went too far. I mean, you don't need that directly in like footballers' faces, but I think the sentiment was there, whereby he wasn't happy with where they finished the season, and I feel like that at the moment. I just don't go as mad as everybody else.
I'm not sure everyone will have seen this, Do you want to explain it in a bit more detail?
It's just a very vocal guy. It's from his perspective.
Set the scene, yeah.
Right, it's the end of the season. They're at home. They've just lost. They've finished 11th, I think it is. And the players are walking around for a well-deserved clap for finishing 11th. Now, some people are clapping because you do. It's your own players. This guy's obviously not happy with how Sheffield United finished the season and is on his own sort of personal crusade to tell him this. And the word failure comes out quite a lot. And there's just ever such a lot of shouting and screaming and telling them that they're a disgrace to the club. Again, maybe took it a bit too far, but I appreciate his honesty.
It did make me think a little bit of when you were saying the week before about your sit-down protest.
Yeah, I'm trying to make out I'm not like that, but there was an element of me in there, so that's kind of what I saw. I just think bits of what he was doing and the way he was acting kind of made me a little bit happy in an odd sadistic way, just because I like that Roy Keane kind of nothing's ever good enough kind of way.
Yeah, don't let the ball bounce. Don't let it bounce. KC, moment of the week?
I suppose it'd have to be Dion Kelly-Evans coming on in the second half for me.
That was nice.
Got a lot of time for the young lad, and he's a massive Coventry fan. He's on the same sort of levels as Ivor, I would say, for passion for the club, and him and his brother always come from Holbrooks, quite a big family from Holbrooks as well, so they're quite well known around the area. And just to see him come on, because he's gone through some ups and downs over this season and over the last 3 years even, and I know how much that means to him. So that's definitely my moment. Another in a strong second place though will probably be seeing Lee Croft on a football pitch, because if he's on a football pitch, then all of us have hope. The shorts barely fit. I couldn't believe it. I was like, "What is this? Is this guy for real?"
They were, as a team, they were sluggish at best, weren't they?
Yeah, no, they were on the beach, weren't they? They were
nicely epitomised by him, yeah. I'm going to be boring and just give it to Adam Armstrong for his goal, and just for the fact that it was 20, and just what it seemed to mean to the players and to those around him. Equally, I think it was interesting getting a first glimpse at Cian Harries, who I think potentially might need to be judged in a situation where somebody puts him under pressure once or twice during 90 minutes, but that you could see why people are talking about him in such high esteem. His ability on the ball was there for everyone to see, wasn't it? Paul, you're going to talk to us about the sort of finer details of the Oldham game, aren't you?
Not really.
No.
Are you on the beach, Paul?
Well, let's face it. I mean, it didn't really mean anything. And yay, we won. Yay, we finished 8th. Yay. But it was all a bit... okay, my biggest positive out of it was I haven't seen us score away since September. And that was the only game I've seen us win away all season.
Wow.
So, I'm going to be... On the positive side, we had that going for it. The negative side, Oldham didn't really seem to care.
I think that's as being very polite to them.
Yeah, I mean, they basically... I think they set up 3-5-2. We definitely set up 3-5-2. The first half, neither team really dominated. Both teams had a couple of long-range shots. Armstrong probably should have got his 20th in the first half when he was played through, and decided he was through on goal, and the keeper came out, and he sort of knocked it past him to try and get the other side. But if he'd have just hit it harder in that general direction, he would have scored. And that really summed up Armstrong up until he scored. We were discussing it in the game. He just seemed to sort of second-guess himself. And I'm so glad he got that 20th goal, because I think it was a massive relief off his shoulders. And I think he deserves that 20th goal just because of what it means, obviously, to him. And I hope, now that Newcastle are probably going to get relegated, that they do look at him and don't play him out wide and don't mess him around. I think the guy's shown... in the games that I've seen this season, he's a number 9. He's clearly a centre forward. You need players around him who are going to release him and get him involved. But I just hope Newcastle don't waste him, and in 4 years' time he's back in League One, because he spent the next 4 years being a bit part player who comes on now and then on the wing, because I think that's just doing him a massive disservice. And then we discussed this quite a lot. In the first half, we played 3-5-2 with Andy Rose on the right wing. Andy Rose isn't really a right wing back. I'm a bit worried about Andy Rose. I think he seems to be a bit of a
shove him anywhere type player.
Yeah, and so far he's been here, he's played in about 4 or 5 different positions, and it's just, I'm not sure how much that has helped him. He scored 2 great goals. He's obviously, everyone likes him because he's an athletics, he stands out. I just hope that we're looking to use him in one position instead of, as a utility player, because it didn't, on the right wing, he just looked out of place. He didn't look comfortable. And it was really noticeable when Dion Kelly-Evans came on at half-time, just how, when we had a balance, we had a proper right-sided player who wanted to be wide, wanted to stay out wide, really knew what he was trying to achieve, how much better we looked in the second half. And in the second half, we basically dominated the game. And we scored off a corner, a great corner from Jacob Murphy. It was nice to see him back on the pitch and look like he cared. And I know we always have this...
Or...
So again?
Look like, is that a deliberate choice of words? Look like he cared?
For me, having seen him against Wigan, I just didn't think he looked that interested.
Okay.
And I know everyone go, they always care. That's fine. I just thought Jacob Murphy in the last couple of weeks had really looked like he didn't really want to be on the pitch. He didn't look hungry. I thought his cameo on Sunday was as good as we've seen him for months. He was energetic. Okay, it helped the fact he was up against Lee Croft, who is like... But he looked energetic. He looked like he wanted to take players on. He looked interested. He had a shot, and he looked like the player that we'd had for the first half of the season. And it was nice to have that as a lasting memory of Jacob Murphy, a player who can excite. And, again, when he's going back to Norwich, he will get relegated. I hope they look to bring him in. I hope that he gets chances in the Championship, because there is certainly a player there. It's just whether or not you can get it out of him enough that he makes a really, his career is as good as his talent. None of us can answer that. Basically down to Jacob Murphy. I think it's a different thing between him and Armstrong. I think Armstrong, it's down to where he's played. But Murphy, I think it's down to whether or not he really, really, really wants it. Having just watched them over the season, their attitudes are slightly different. Kieran Harris came on. He looked really tidy. Vince Lowe played in the right-hand side of the defence again. Looked a bit shaky, but he's looked shaky when he's played in defence all season. So I thought Jack Stevens again showed why I really hope he gets a chance somewhere next season. I know we discussed this last week. I still see him as a Championship centre-back. I think he's just got that grace about him. But, again, it's his career. He can do what the hell he likes.
He's a lovely player, isn't he?
He's lovely to watch. We've discussed this in the past, how Reece Charles-Cook he made a brilliant save in the first half. Reece Charles-Cook he's a player you want to watch. He does everything with a certain amount of style. And, sometimes that helps and maybe overlook some of the flaws in their games. Because don't get me wrong, Jack Stevens has got some flaws in his game, but he's so easy on the eye that you wish him the best. I said Biggie had a good game. Fleck, not quite so, but people are going to make a opinion on Fleck over the last 4 years, not over one game against Oldham. Gladchef came on. He looked neat and tidy.
Yeah, how did he get on, actually? Because the only reference I've got is from the last time he came on, and some words were said. So what about this time?
He just looked... He gave him the ball, he gave it to someone else. He didn't really...
Nice.
Yeah. Do you not think he made a big difference? I couldn't put my finger on it, but we looked at a different team when he came on. And I don't know whether it was a couple of different players coming on, but I felt that was where we kicked up a gear, was when he entered the pitch.
I don't know, I just thought in the second half we would just gradually get more and more on top.
Possibly,
I just think at that point... And I think it was also a case that nothing really worked for Ruben Lemaris when he was on the pitch. Every intricate pass he tried just failed.
Yeah.
And Gladchef didn't try anything intricate. He just kept the ball moving. So that breakdown wasn't occurring because he wasn't trying anything. He wasn't trying to break them down. He was just trying to retain the ball. And I think we just had enough that, we had enough other players. By that point, Murphy was on the pitch. We had enough other players who could do the actual damage. Plus, Anthony Gerrard again looked a bit overweight in Oldham's defence. They didn't look like the sort of team who were playing League One football. They looked like the sort of team who probably just come back from the pub.
This has been our most Susanna and Trini season, I feel like. This is the most we've been disparaging of players' weight since we've been doing this podcast.
When you look at yourself and you think, God, I'm overweight, and you look on the pitch and go, I wouldn't be the fattest player on the pitch. And then the final person I really want to mention is George Thomas, and it's really interesting with George Thomas. Obviously, he came through with Maddison, and I think at one point to the outside world they were talked of in the same breath, and it was like we got these two kids coming through, and obviously he's been playing with the Welsh national team through all the age groups, and obviously having watched Maddison obviously isn't the number 10, isn't the number 9 striker, so I'm assuming that George Thomas was, and the last game the ball came over there and he didn't go for it, and Pritchard, who's the group striker, went, I'm a bit worried about that. He didn't seem to have that striker's instinct. And in the first half, a ball came over from Armstrong. It's on the highlights, and he probably should have done better with it. And I know that might sound a bit cruel, but he was only about 4 or 5 yards out, and it was a bit of a bad miss. And while I don't want to sort of hammer him for that, I think just a goal in that game would have really settled him into next season. And then in about the 89th minute, and the only reason I know it was that late because a minute later they put it at the board, he was running through with Armstrong, and he created a space to have a shot, and then he tried to take another touch and play Armstrong through.
Yeah.
And it was like, you should have shot then. There was no worries there. You could have hit the bloody stand. It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
But what mattered was you had a shot at that point.
I think that one little episode of his performance probably shows what is actually probably the problem with George at the moment. I spoke to him today about it. I think he just needs to believe that he belongs on that football pitch a little bit more, because he seems to just worry about giving other people the ball. He doesn't seem to believe in his own ability as much as others do. The biggest compliment he's ever had is that out of all the footballers that at our football club, Joe Cole said that George Thomas would be the best player out of all of our players, because he just thinks he's got the attributes. I think George just needs to go away in the summer, then come back and actually just believe that he can do it, because I think that is a really crucial aspect of being a young footballer and progressing through. It's being able to take those types of shots on, it's being able to score, because the weird thing is, in under-21s football, you look at his goal-scoring record, it's unbelievable, he's scoring like 2 a game, but the biggest problem is that Tony Mowbray will be watching from the sidelines, and he gets 5 chances a game, and Tony Mowbray's come up to me after the end of the game and went, well, actually, you should be scoring at least 4 of them. He's come off with 2, and he'll be thinking in his head, that's not enough. And so then there's a belief that in his head, which will build after those games, that he thinks, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm not good enough. And he can tell it just affects him. So this is why when he gets into the first team, he's more concerned about giving other players the ball so they can have the chances, rather than taking them on himself, because he's scared of missing them in a way. That's what I seem to see in George at the moment.
That's a big thing, though, isn't it? A big thing for a kid. He's got to shake that, because that's your livelihood there, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah,
not in a bad way. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Callum Wilson in the fact where he for that first season he was coming on sub and he scored one good goal, but I always sensed that he didn't quite realise just how good he was. And then it was the Sixfield season where suddenly something clicked in his mind. He's like, hang on, I'm better than these players, and that's what Thomas has got to do, hasn't he? He's really got to. Something's got to go his way, and then I think he might push on.
The comparison with Wilson and Thomas, of course, is that Thomas has been largely played out on the wing when he's played in the first team this season. He's not a winger, is he?
But it's also the fact that
I don't think he's a number 9 as well. The one thing I would say, even though he does usually play up front, I think what you might see through his career and maybe next season as well, if you're playing a 4-2-3 or what, or playing the system we did on Saturday with one slightly behind the forward striker, he's more a 10. His skills are more accustomed to a 10 position where he can sort of go into behind a main striker and then take opportunities from there.
The thing is, it's going to be interesting now, isn't it? Because obviously, we've set our stall out that 8th isn't good enough for next season. Next season, we need to be getting promoted, which is great. It's a great statement to make.
Yes.
But you've got to look at people like, and again with Dion Kelly-Evans and Harris and George Thomas, between the 3 of them, obviously 2 of them made their debut, and I think that was George Thomas's 2nd or 3rd start. It's a lot of responsibility to put on players who are going to be. When you watch George Thomas, even though he's the same age as Maddison and Armstrong and those, you can tell he's not quite physically at that level yet. He hasn't, and this is one of the problems with playing under 21 football, is he's playing against other kids his own size, his own build, and I don't think he's not a diver. But the problem is, again, last week he was getting brushed off the ball.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that people like Joe Cole and Maddison and Armstrong don't get brushed off the ball is because they're very astute at how they position their body. And George Thomas hasn't really developed that yet. Now, I
agree with what you're saying. I think that the reason he's like that now is actually he's had knee problems this season, which has affected him. I think if he didn't have that over three months of the season, he might have probably pushed on our team a little bit more, and that has probably weakened it slightly. So that's what I mean when I say that he has to go away and just spend some time away from football and then come back stronger, get in the gym, work on his core strength, get it back again, because he was very strong when he was younger. Last season he was very strong, and then he'll definitely be a better player, I think. And I think your point as well, that it's a lot of pressure on those players. I think if you think of George Thomas, next season in the squad as it makes up, he'd be the fourth choice or the third choice striker out of four strikers. Then Kean Harries would be the fourth choice as well. And then Dion Kelly-Evans would be maybe the second choice right back behind Jordan Willis. And so whilst I agree that there's a little bit of pressure there, I don't think it's a bad thing for those players actually to just be in the undercurrent of the squad. So once or twice, when we've got injuries, that they can step in, and then when the experienced players come back, then they'll come back out of it, and then they'll be better for it, I think.
Paul, any final thoughts on the Oldham game?
No, it's not. As I said, it was nice to win away, and as I was walking out the ground, I heard the Oldham announcer go, and this is not good enough for Oldham, and next year we'll be doing all we can to make sure we're up in the promotion places. Right. And I was thinking, well, that's 24 teams then, 23 teams we're competing against, because if Oldham are saying that, then literally every other club in League One's going, next year is our big push for the Championship.
Yeah, very much so.
Sorry, I think that leads into the next thing, is on the retain list. And the players, obviously, we've let a lot of players go. We're looking to bring in a lot of players. We're in competition with a lot of other clubs for this pool of players who are willing to drop down or move into League One. It's going to be very an interest. And what I find quite interesting about the retain list is, and especially what Kieran's just said, is if Kieran Harris is fourth choice centre-half, that means we are going to be bringing in, I suppose, 3 other centre-halves. And I know we'll probably discuss Aaron Martin. That's why, for me, I'd have kept Aaron Martin, just because I think I don't mind bringing in 2 more centre-halves. I just think having to bring in 3 centre-halves is as good as Aaron Martin and better. I think it could be quite difficult on a limited budget.
But it'll be 2, won't it? Because it'll be Sam Ricketts will be one of the 4, presumably.
No, Sam Ricketts is going to refuse his contract because they're going to say, we're not going to play every week, and he's going to go move to Oldham and play every game alongside Anthony Gerrard.
Kieran, have you got a view on that?
On the retain list as a whole, or just...
Well, on Sam Ricketts specifically.
Sam Ricketts.
A player that you expect to be a first-choice player next season?
No. So Sam Ricketts is offered a contract, basically, because he's a fantastic club captain in terms of what he does around the training ground, in terms of how he organises the players, and in terms of all his work off the pitch as well. So he's that sort of player. He's not going to be first choice. He will be another player who will not be relied upon to start the first game of the season, but 5 games down the line, when there might be an injury to someone, he'll go in and fill that position. That's the hope anyways, and then Tony's speaking to him now to try and get that contract sorted. He's also going to do a bit of coaching on so what they do as well. They do a lot of group sort of sessions in terms of defenders, midfielders and attackers. And so Sam will be in every single defenders meeting, and he'll be able to use his experience to point things out on videos to the younger players and sort of show them how to. So almost like taking up a defensive coach role. He's taken some coaching sessions this week at Brighton, and everyone's nothing but praise for him in terms of that. So he's going to be filling a lot of sort of roles, because I know how you guys feel about it. I see your tweets about Ricketts, and I've seen certain others. I think he's been very unlucky in the sense that he's had to play in pretty much every position across the back 4 this season. And so sometimes when he's been under par, people have got on his back. But, it must be very difficult for 1 week to fill left back, the next week to fill right back, the next week to go back to centre back, and then always having the people around you change. I think he hasn't been as bad as some people are making out this season. I think he's had poor moments, admittedly, but he has played a lot of minutes, really. So I think the belief inside the club is that whilst we don't want him playing all the minutes he has this season, he's definitely still worth having round. And if we don't have him for every game next season, then I'm sure he'll be able to pull in some better performances to which he has that towards the back end of the season.
But I just worry that if part of his problem is the moving around, if you're retaining him to be back up in a number of defensive positions...
I think he'd be retained, actually, to play in the middle. So I think you wouldn't have him at left back. I think you'd have him retained to play in the middle. Then you'd have Willis, Dion Kelly-Evans right back covered, with Jacob Whitmore coming in as the under-21s if needed, but probably won't be. But he's an exceptional talent as well. So then you have him at centre back covering the spaces there. So you need 2 first team centre backs, maybe even a third centre back, considering the way it's gone this season. Hopefully a bit more injury dependent this season. Then you've got Chris Stokes and Ryan Haynes at left back. So obviously the centre back is a major worry. On Aaron Martin, my personal feelings, and I think he's been very unlucky, really. I think he's improved immensely this season. I think last season there was a mistake in him, and I think there were certain moments in him where you thought you did worry. But this season he has really, really improved. He's been one of the more consistent performers. But Tony has a strong belief that he's not a defender he wants to rely on every week. He doesn't think he's strong enough. Doesn't feel like he's going to get rid of the ball all the time. Doesn't feel as though he's in his mind he wants obviously someone like Reed or like a big Ben Turner sort of type of player, and doesn't see Aaron doing that. Aaron, really, his biggest problem, I would say, is that he just probably needs to go away and sort of get in the gym and strengthen his legs up a bit, because even though he's a big guy, he's like 6'4" and he looks big. It doesn't seem he can. We've seen him pushed off the ball quite a few times this season, and you think if he corrects that side of his game, then he'd actually be more than good enough to play for us next season. He even maybe go up a level, but that for me would be the only one where I'd say, well, he's been unlucky in the entire retain list, really.
Just seems like a very big gamble to me for someone who's played 33 games this season, 32 games, and it's been, I would say, like good in all of them. That's a big gamble to then.
It is a big gamble, but they have worked on their recruitment. They've got the scouts in place. They have got names already up on that board. They have been up on that board for the last month or so.
Has Aaron Martin seen this board? Maybe that's put him off.
No.
Was it Daryl? Was it Daryl Strawberry, Mike Socia, Steve Sachs?
Yeah, but they're very confident that these names, and I've seen the names really, and I'd be as confident as anyone in saying that the names on that board are better than what we've just released. And if the club can get those names and bring them in for next season, then the club defensively and across the park will be in a much stronger position. And finishing above 8th next season won't be an issue. So good luck with 7th.
I know that you're not going to tell us who those players are, obviously, but I know there's a lot of people shouting at their radios now, ask him at least. Who's on that list?
I can't say that, can I?
I can't say
that.
Sorry, go on, Paul.
I'd also want, and I know this is a personal taste, I still think Aaron Phillips has been unlucky, and I think he's a better right back than Jordan Willis. I know Jordan Willis has had his injuries this season. I didn't think he started the season great. I think he's fine. I think hopefully he'll come on to be really good. For me, I just think the way you play 4-2-3-1, I like my fullback to be able to advance down the pitch and not get a nosebleed. And I just think Aaron Phillips is another player who, he makes defensive mistakes. I'm not denying that. I think other players around, like John Fleck, has made defensive mistakes. Vince Lowe's made defensive mistakes. Everyone makes defensive mistakes. I just think he is, out of the players we talked about at the start of the season, about players who really had to show that they were good enough, that they were making strides forward. He, alongside Reece Charles Cook, have been the only 2 players who've come through the youth team who were here already, who you had question marks over them, and both of them, I think, have really made giant strides forward. And I feel sorry for Aaron Phillips. I just think I know other people going, he's more of a right midfielder than a right back. That's fine. I said it's a personal thing. I just think he's better than Jordan Willis.
I think with Aaron, I get your point, and I do rate Aaron. As I've been on this show before, I like him as a footballer. I think he has got some really good attributes. The only problem, and the only thing I would say about Aaron, and I think it is the right. I'll put it on record. I think it is the right decision to let him go. I think he has had a lot of chances now over the last few years. He's 22 years old, and he's never really made that position stick. He's never really made that. We've always talked about, I've definitely said it on this show, as soon as that position becomes Aaron Phillips' and like he's able to nail it down, when Cyrus Christie was ahead of him and when Jordan Clark was ahead of him, and then you think, Aaron, right, take the chance and take them. For some reason, it just hasn't happened. Defensive mistakes, like, there has been moments where it's a complete liability, especially giving away penalties. And Tony doesn't see.
He gave away 2. John Fleck gave away 2. That's fair. It's not like he gave away 10. It's
was such bad luck.
Isn't that enough? And the way he gave him away as well. It wasn't like. It's not
deliberately punching the ball though, is it? It's just it feels like it's got the worst luck in the world.
I don't think it's bad luck. I think it's really bad decision making for me.
Punching the ball.
I think Aaron hasn't developed that mental side to the game. I think his personality needs to come on a little bit more. And he will be a good player, I think, but that's somewhere else, because he needs to get out of the club and get out of his comfort zone and then progress somewhere else and build his own sort of life and get away from his family and find himself a little bit more.
I was waiting for that to come up.
You see him every single day and you think you need more from the lads. You need more of a personality in football really to succeed, and that's where Aaron Phillips might fall down. But wish him all the best of luck anyways.
Marcus Tudguy, is that a discussion point that anyone wants to have? Neil, have you got thoughts on that?
I have. I don't like it.
I love it.
I can see why he's done it again. It's kind of a Sam Ricketts kind of decision. He wants these people around the club. At the beginning of last season, I didn't think Tudguy was good enough, and this year, while he's come on and he's made impact, I just don't feel like this he's barely played this year, really. He's barely been a first-choice striker, and it's more a judgment on him, really. I just kind of feel like, does he want another season like this year? Because I can't see he's going to get much more time. I can't. Kieran, can you sort of divulge what he's been offered? Is it a similar sort of Sam Ricketts kind of offer? It's
exactly the sort of Sam Ricketts offer, yeah. It's exactly that sort of come in and fill the gap when needed, really. He has sort of done that this season, really. And the weird thing is, if you look, has he scored 5 goals? He's started 6 times, scored 5 goals, which is a remarkable stat, really, for someone. I like Marcus as a person, and I think sometimes he's unlucky. I think sometimes, especially this season, he's been unlucky not to be considered a little bit more to start in certain situations when Adam hasn't been scoring, or when maybe Marc-Antoine Fortuné has been preferred. Like Marcus Tudguy's come in, so against Southend when we lost 3-0, it was an awful day, but one of the best performances on the pitch was Marcus Tudguy. But because it was an awful team and it was an awful sort of day, that Marcus then wasn't considered to start again because he was part of that team and then considered part of that problem in a way. I think Marcus next season will probably do the same again. He'll probably make 20 appearances, but he'll do exactly what Sam will do: be in the strikers' meetings and teach them about the game and teach them, use his experience around the place, and that's the thinking really behind him getting another contract. Really,
Paul, have you got thoughts on Tudguy?
Well, yeah, I'm saying Neil's. I mean, at the end of the day, Fortuné was preferred to him 14 times. Fortuné started 14 times, Tudguy started 6. And there were a number of times when Fortuné came on as a sub, and it was just, if you already preferring Fortuné, who didn't have a particularly good season, to Tudguy, I understand keep him around. And yeah, just he's going to be 35 next season, and it's just, I understand he's going to be 3rd or 4th choice. That's fine. But he still came on 19 times and started 6 times. He still had a big impact. He still played he made a lot of appearances, even if they were only short periods. He came on. We all remember he came on against Burton when we tried to play long ball football, and it was like, oh my God, what are we doing? And it's his role within the team. It's sort of, I suppose it all depends on what the other three strikers are. The problem this season is the other three strikers were Armstrong, who was great, who had one style of playing, Fortune, who was less great, and then Darius Henderson, who was a complete joke. And I think it's a case of we need to make sure that if whatever we do with the other strikers, we either get two very similar strikers, so we have an Adam Armstrong mark A and B, or we do make sure that we have Armstrong A and our B is a bit more physical, so he isn't a plan B, he's just a squad member.
But a physical player can then contribute to scoring goals as well. I think that's been the biggest issue this season. You've got two sources of goals, both of which dried up at the same time, and so then we didn't score any goals. And so Marcus comes in, tries to do a job, and so does Marc-Antoine Fortuné, but really, I agree with you, they shouldn't be depended on to score goals. I think, actually, if you look into the performances of Marcus Tuggai, and you put him next to... I think he's actually played quite well during points this season, and he has scored as many goals pretty much as he started, but... If he is, that's a case in point. If next season there's still a situation where Marcus will have to be depended upon to score some goals when he comes in and whatever, then that would probably be a problem. But I don't think that is the plan for next season. I think that is he will be there to fill those November months if there's an injury or two.
And from that, then it's fine. I mean, basically, if you bring him on for 10 minutes and we need someone up front with a bit of intelligence, that's fine.
Yeah. My
problem is it was like, oh shit, we need a goal, we'll bring Tuggai on. And it's like, he isn't that player. He's never been, not only is he not particularly a good, I know he scored goals this season, but he's never been particularly lethal during his entire career. And he's not that big, tall target man who's going to flick on and create goals for others. He's very much without using a really stupid term, he's a defensive attacker. He's good at holding the ball up and bringing others into play.
Yeah.
And he's good at releasing it, the pressure. But when you start relying on him for anything more than that, especially over a season, I mean, the rest of the list, I think, really talks for itself, doesn't it? I mean, on the release list, it's, there's no one there who... What's quite interesting is quite a lot of them were bought in January.
Well, yeah. Kieran, I have a question about one of the people on the list. Sorry to cut you off, Paul, but I didn't know whether you were sort of going to write them off. Just the one person that stuck out for me was Lawrenson.
Oh, now, I'll tell you one thing about Martin Lawrenson. He would definitely be in my worst ever CCFC 11. Really? I think he's not a very good footballer whatsoever.
Is he still at the club? Is he gone now?
No, he was in today. All the players are in today. So he was in
Will
today.
Will he be in tomorrow?
No one's... No, so the final day was today. All players came in for like a 10-minute session with the manager and then left and sort of all that sort of stuff. But he's not a footballer for me. I cannot believe...
he's got Sweden caps, hasn't he?
See, this is a myth as well, right?
Oh, right.
You all believed it. You all thought you were having the Swedish international. We put it out there, but not really. I looked into it, and he played in a Sweden game in Chiang Mai in Thailand, what was called the King's Cup, and it wasn't a registered FIFA international or anything like that. It was just like a friendly, but someone had modified his wiki page to say that he played for Sweden. But it's.
I bet he did it, didn't he?
Yeah, might have. But no, I think the game against Colchester was just a shocking thing for me. Like, he didn't tackle once, and then the way they scored and the way he got turned for them to cross the ball in, it was actually at that point where I was like, why isn't Dean Kelly Evans playing? Like, I don't understand this player. How can he not tackle and be a defender, and yet still spend more time in our attacking box than our defensive box? There was times when he was on the pitch and he was on the left side of midfield, and you're like, hang on, where are you going? There's no discipline to his game. It's really, really poor, I thought. And then in training, he broke down a couple of times, and there were the fitness issues as well. So, just not a good footballer, not a very good signing.
How did we ever sign him then?
Was it Lemiris by any chance?
Say again?
Was it to do with Lemiris? Because he was from the same Swedish club.
To be fair, he came in, had an extended trial period, played in under 21s games where he did tackle, and you think, wow, this is he played against Sheffield United in under 21s on Stockbridge Park Steel's football pitch, an awful pitch, and he didn't let the ball go once. He had a fantastic performance. You think, Christ, if you can control the ball on this pitch and play like the way, then he's going to be an excellent footballer. Then you look at his CV and you think, hang on, this player might have something.
Under 21s.
Well, no, but as soon as he signed the contract,
he's hard, isn't he?
Like he broke down. And you thought, wow, we've been mugged.
Neil, you summed it up perfectly because all I've seen on Twitter all evening is yeah, but we're going to sign all these brilliant players, and it's one of the players they brought in recently has been described as one of the worst players that Kieran's seen. It's and I suppose the other question is, you won't be able to answer this, but you probably don't. It's not worth the hassle. But why did we sign Peter Ramage and Stephen Hunt? Why? What was Darius Henderson? Exactly the same. What was the point? I mean, it's just
Darius. I get the Darius one. I think Peter. See, I think it's a shame. They were good on trial. They were
showing off.
Surely the fact he's been signed from the Indian Premier League sort of gives.
It's Peter Ramage. You still think, hey, excuse me, Paul, but honestly, when we put that out, there were people going, "Oh, Coventry signed Peter Ramage. We're really going for it this season." And so there was a thought to build this Peter Ramage. He was excellent in training, and then it was obvious maybe from not the first game, but the second game he played in. There was issues obviously with his just pace and covering the ground, in particular Southend actually, where he was pretty poor. Stephen Hunt, I feel sorry. I feel Stephen Hunt. I spoke to Stephen today actually. He's been disappointed over his time here because it was like the way he described it. He said it was obvious that the engine was off for too long and it took a while to get going again. I think he's actually played quite well in the last two games. I'm going to give him a bit of credit. I thought he's actually looked all right, but. He was saying, well, when I came in, obviously I hadn't played since the summer, and so then he played in the first game, and sort of it just just crashed a little bit. And he said that it was obvious that I took too long off to get a club, and then had to work my way up too quickly, and he found it difficult. So, yeah.
Well, I completely understand that. I agree. I think Stephen Hunt's been all right in the last two games. But the reason I find it really odd with this Stephen Hunt was, it obviously took Joe Cole a while to regain his fitness.
Yeah.
And he'd still been a professional footballer, and it took him, and it was just sort of, Stephen Hunt's not had a club for 6 months.
Yeah.
I think really going to take him a long time if ever get back to Matt. And it just seemed, and I think the thing with it was, he then brought him on the left wing, which, especially the way we play, such an energetic role. And it was like, you've got him, then you've got people like Lemares, and at that point, Jim O'Brien sat on the bench, and you're like, but that doesn't make sense. That just logically, you've seen Joe Cole huffing and puffing, and he was a professional footballer. I think his ass.
I think the difference between Joe and Stephen in that respect is almost like Stephen wasn't honest with himself, and he wasn't honest with. Like, he would never go in and say that he was injured. Not once did he say he was injured or anything or struggling. Whilst Joe, who obviously knows his body a little bit more and just is a bit more honest about it, came in and said, look, I've broke down. I need to come back away from it. And so he went through a whole sort of mini pre-season over that course of 3 weeks when he just worked with the physio staff. Maybe that's what Stephen Hunt should have done. But he was very honest. But he wasn't very honest. He sort of covered it up and sort of, when he played 80 minutes in the under-21s at Crewe, he said he felt great and felt brilliant. Yeah, never felt better. And it was really he was just probably kidding himself a little bit. There was probably a problem there, but you just didn't know.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, Stephen Hunt's a great guy as well. That's really good.
I gather he's a one-man walking banter factory, which makes him an enemy.
Yeah,
of
he
Paul's.
really is. He really is
an enemy of Paul's immediately. So I guess even off the pitch, it's not going to it's going to work there.
Anyone who defines himself by how much banter they give is a bit of an I'm sorry, but even if you're the Archbishop of Banterbury, you're still an idiot.
You nearly give up on Reece Charles Clarke almost exclusively for the banter. That you were quite offended by that, weren't you?
As I said, at that moment in time, it was more in my focus on Twitter being the Joker than he was on the pitch being a very good goalkeeper. Because on the pitch, he was also a bit of a clown.
I agree.
Something happened. I don't know if someone had a word with him, or if he just realised, I'm first choice goalkeeper in a League One club, so that puts me sort of quite high up. I'm only 22. If I balls this up, I might not get another chance. And as we discussed last week, hats off to again, he made a brilliant save on Saturday when we could have easily been 1-0 down. And, I get a lot of criticism for being a miserable, whinging bastard. But I like to think I can sort of take my hat. The guy has really, really improved, and bless him, because he's actually, as the last week's Neil Lamptey show, there's mouth and trousers there now, and that's all I want. I don't give a shit about their personalities. I don't care what they're like in real life. All I want is them to, for me, see them on the pitch, giving their best and, to some extent, giving the best for themselves, because they're a League One player. It's up to them. If they really want to make it a higher level, they've got to be a success for Cov. Because if they're not going to go to the Championship or Premier League if they're shit for Cov. So it's down to them. Whether or not I like them doesn't really matter. It's whether or not they're good enough, and they show that. And for Rhys Charles-Cook, he's really shown that he is a top-class League One goalkeeper. And I can't ask for more.
The thing with Rhys Charles-Cook, you track it back through the season. You go back to last summer, and Tony really talked him up to his face. Said that I really believe that you've got some ability. And obviously, the plan was to go into this season with Lee Burge as number one. You go back to the summer, you actually look through the games. Obviously, if you remember, that Rhys had to play in several of the pre-season games because Lee actually had an injury, and it was like. Yeah, I remember him telling it to me. It's like, Lee's left the door open here, and he sensed an opportunity, and he enjoyed the fact he was playing as number one. And he thought, right, I'm giving it my all. And his mentality just changed completely as a professional, not as a person. He's always been a really good person, but like as a professional, it seemed to click to him that this is what I want to do. If I'm going to do it, then I'm going to be successful at it. And he just almost devoted his whole life towards it. Also, another thing as well, you think about his family. Regan Charles-Cook down at Charlton played in a first-team game towards the start of the season. He's probably looking at his younger brother going, right, it's sibling rivalry and it's massive in their family. Like, they always get on with each other, but that sibling rivalry has probably drove him on as well because he's seen his brother being successful at Charlton, played against Charlton in the under-21s, and he just thought, right, I need to progress past my brother now. He's set the bar to another standard. And so he's kicked on from there. And I agree, like, I see certain people posting about Rhys and how they don't trust Rhys, and there's been, I don't get it, obviously the way he plays sometimes, there might be the odd mistake in there because he's willing to take the ball in areas no other keeper at this level will ever do. He's pulled off the save at Port Vale when he was going 2 yards the one way, it came back and somehow clicked it over the bar. It was outstanding, and he's a real asset for the football club, and he's just a fantastic person as well. I know what you mean about the personality on Twitter. He was doing that, being a bit silly with it last season, I think, and we spoke about that several times. But really, he is a genuinely good person who wants to succeed at a football club. One of my highlights at the club this season was when he did his Christmas list in the programme. And it read quite funny, but there was a real genuine sort of seriousness behind it, where he really wants success for this club. He's really grown attached to it, and he wants to be part of that. And he's not just the typical player going, I want to be Premier League, I want to be this, that, and the other. He wants to have success with Cov. He's so eager for it, and he goes around the training around saying that he's vice captain. He wants to be that person who can be relied upon.
How much time do you spend on the players' social media profiles?
Quite a lot, really, especially the lads from the academy. Like, so, the lads will always ask me for pictures after games and stuff, and I'll send them some pictures. I'll monitor. The one thing I would say I've been particularly worried about is the use of Periscope in the changing room. I said that wasn't right. I had to tell off Kyle Spence once because he was saying certain words on Periscope on Twitter, and you think, hang on, what are you doing? Corey Adai as well. There's a real we've obviously had a real bad incident earlier last week with Chris Stokes, of course, which and these are the dangers of Twitter, and you sort of that use of that sort of thing where I think you've got to let fans into an extent, but I think where you're using like videos, you've got to be really careful, and that you're not setting yourself up for a fall straight away.
What does Tony think of it?
He's not bothered about it.
He's not bothered.
No. It's like all that sort of stuff. He's not. But he says to me, Kieran, if you've ever got a problem with what they're doing, you go and if you go and try and sort it out and speak to them and shout at them, whatever, blah blah blah. But if they don't listen to you and you feel you need to take it further, then get me involved. But otherwise, I trust you to get it done. That's just what he's like, really.
Go on. Sorry.
I can't. I watch it and I see it, and I think most of them are fairly responsible. I think in the way, and it's nice to get that insight. I think quite trivial, but the one thing that bugs me is seeing our players kind of, on Instagram at 2 a.m, like there's a game the next day and stuff like that. It's like, no, settle down. You know, you shouldn't be there liking a load of.
I think I spoke to Ruben Ramirez a few times about that this season. I mean, sometimes when he's not actually involved and he knows he's not involved, but still he's got to maintain a professionalism. And I've always said, like, imagine if you're at Tottenham and you are like Eric Lamela and you're doing that at 2 o'clock in the morning. That would make the biggest headlines ever. But so you got to believe that you are that player. You believe that you are the professional player you aspire to be. Because if you're not in your personal life as well as your professional life, then you won't make it ultimately. I think the biggest thing for social media, which really pissed me off in my whole time at the club, was when we were going down last season, weren't we? Really, there was before we beat Fleetwood and Chesterfield, we were going down, and yet in the week leading up to that, in like that short space leading up to that game, we had players in the dressing room singing a fucking rap video, and you're thinking, what are you doing? Like we're going down, and you're singing a rap video on Instagram and putting it out on. You've got to show you care. You got what are fans going to think looking at that? Certain fans might think, oh yeah, that's really cool, blah blah blah. But they're the younger generation, but. The main core of our support, with players doing that in dressing rooms and putting the videos out and sort of just looking like, just why are you being so stupid?
That is the worry, isn't it? It's the mentality thing around kind of, it's almost, they're living their lives on social media almost too much. And I know I sound like a granddad, and this is my job, so I shouldn't be worried about it. But I kind of feel like there's almost, with a lot of the young players, the focus immediately after the game is, got to get on Twitter. Got to get on. Tweeting, I know. There's been a few. I mean, Jim O'Brien used to take the mick out of the lads, didn't he? Just because of the way they were. But sometimes I feel like the focus isn't quite what it should be, and it's more about like the impression they're making rather than actually just the impression they should be making is one of just actually caring about what's going on and the results and things like that should impact them. And it's just a lingering concern of mine, I'd say.
I think as time goes by, I think if you think about the period of time they're sort of going through, like social media is just like sort of a growing sort of thing, and like people are learning about how to use it all the time, and I think they're sort of these people, this generation of footballers are probably going to make mistakes in it more than any other generation, because by the time in 10 years time then you know all your not do's and the things you should be doing as well. I think that you might actually see a lot more players now coming off Twitter, I would say, because it gets to them so much when they get so James Maddison. Like when it was almost like an addiction that he had to look at his phone, but he knew that if he looked at his phone after we sold him, then he's going to see the worst abuse you'd ever wish on anybody, really. And yet he continued to do it, and it got into his head, it got him down, and then you saw what happened in the second half of the season. But his head just wasn't right, because he was coming into the training ground, and the lad was suffering. The lad was genuinely hurt by what people were saying about him, and that people were coming up to him, recording a selfie and then calling him a snake on a video and stuff like this. And you're thinking, James, you just stop looking at the phone. But he was like, I can't. But that's what you have to do. Like, you know, that's what I think. And I think he's learned from this. And I think
get that man in rehab. He sounds like he's got trouble.
No, it was genuinely affecting him. It was killing him. He had 2 death threats on social media. He had 2 death threats, which we had to report. And it got to him. It genuinely got. He was close to tears at times, and people don't think about this. People don't think about the lad. He's only 19 years old, and he got this move. And I know people are upset about it, and I was upset about when I heard about it, because I thought the timing was poor and everything. But you know, think about the actual human being involved here. This is a young lad who is achieving his dreams and on a big money move, which is going to set up his family for life. And that's the reality of the situation. Don't go on social media and do that sort of thing and record a video. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. Supposed Coventry fans going up to him, recording a video and calling him a snake. You're a snake, man. You're a snake, and then not letting him go. What the hell? What's going on with the world?
Well, the problem is people like Maddison probably on Twitter from the age of 13 and 14, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they've grown up with it. And they're sort of, you know, I'm a young footballer, I'm on Twitter with my mates, and then suddenly their sort of whatever, I can't remember what they're called, followers goes up.
Yeah, notifications.
Like, I've got 10,000, I've got 20,000 followers. How many have you got? You've only got 6,000. And then suddenly they get into the first team and it bumps up again. And then they're putting little tricks on, like, hey, look how brilliant I am. And we saw it. I mean, it was all going Maddison's way. He got injured. We were still winning, so it's like, we're winning, but Maddison's going to come back, so we're going to be even better. And he came back, and it took him a while to get back to, and the team was going through a bit of a stumble, and then we sold him. And it was just sort of, oh, okay. And you're almost like, as you said, someone should have just turned to him and said, look, you've got to let it go now. You're now a Premier League footballer. You're not a 19-year-old kid playing in Coventry's first team. You are now a Premier League footballer on loan to Coventry City.
Yeah.
And you've got to then take that. You're now one of the elite athletes in this game. I know nothing, and I think the problem is nothing changed for him. He signed for Norwich, but he was still all calf. And I don't follow the player.
He went from like the boyhood hero to like zero, and he just didn't understand. Even though he knew he'd moved, it almost mentally he couldn't understand how it had happened, and he never had been in that situation before in his entire life, where he's come through all the youth teams at Coventry, and he's always been praised and accepted and welcomed wherever stage of his life he's ever been, and then crash bang right one day in his life it all falls apart, and all the people he thought he trusted in the city and all the fans he thought he trusted but turned against him, and he couldn't mentally deal with it. And this is why then he sort of retaliated by putting out the lions and the sheeps, and then that was made a big thing about it. And he came up to me and was like, I don't know what to do, Kieran. I went, you've got to let it go now. Let it go and just leave your phone alone, and just focus on your football and just smile. So, yeah. But the worst, you know what the worst thing about this whole thing has actually been? That James Maddison, when I'm on the wall, I've got people who are obviously talking down the pub who don't know James Maddison. They say, oh, I've heard he's an arrogant little shit as well. And I've heard he's this, that and the other. Look at his hair and all this sort of stuff. The people who, you don't know him, he's a fantastic guy. He's a really, really good lad. Who's just really, really pleasurable to be around. And people talking absolute garbage about him as a person. You criticise the footballer, but don't criticise the person. I don't understand that.
I might want my... Sorry, final thing on Maddison. I might actually want my ingenious mercurial number 10 to be a little bit arrogant. I'm not sure that's the worst thing in the entire world.
I think he's arrogant on the pitch, isn't he? But I think he leaves it on the pitch. He does... And he doesn't take it off the pitch at all. He's just such a grounded human being, like just because he's got a fantastic family who have always been around him. They've helped mould this person into because he could be the most arrogant person you'd ever come across, but he's not like that.
The concern now, so I don't want to round it off on James Maddison, is that he kind of needs that adulation. That almost maybe that helped him as a footballer. That's maybe why he came through so quickly, was because he had the adulation and he had the belief of people behind him. He's now got to find a way to be the same footballer that he was, but he won't get the adulation at Norwich. He's not the same player. He doesn't have up through the ranks kind of youngster. He's got a lot of expectation now. They spend some money on him. They're expecting something special. So he's got to find a way to deal with it, because I know football, a lot of it's in your head, but he needs to divorce himself with what people are saying about him and just again focus on him as a footballer.
I'll round it off on Matt James after the. Trying to get him to laugh at it. So I played him at table tennis once, and he absolutely thrashed me. And so he was sort of going, Kieran, you're not no good. And I just went, well, lions will always beat sheep, mate. I just walked off.
Very nice. Right, shall we move on? I've got a handful of very vague open questions to ask you, Kieran, in an attempt to try and find out some goss, but we'll have to find out. So, talk to me about players that have stood out. So this is what, 4-year career at Cov?
5 seasons.
5 seasons in total, okay.
5 seasons, yeah.
Who stood out one way or another in your time there?
On the pitch.
On the pitch, off the pitch?
Off the pitch. Adam Barton, Blair Adams. I still speak to Blair now. He's doing a sports journalism degree, so helping with the odd thing.
Is he still playing?
Say again?
Is he still playing?
Yeah, he's at Notts County, and he's actually done. Okay. We went on loan to Mansfield, and he's done really well. I've always rated Blair Adams. Actually.
Yeah, it must have changed for him, wasn't it?
I thought so. If I was looking through like a best Cov 11, I'd have him as left back in that team. I thought he was the best left back we've had during this period. But they're just two really, really good people, just normal people, really, who just happy to be around and just don't really mould it into being a footballer. So those people always stick out. And then I'll have to say Reece Charles Cook as well. He just is a really, really nice, personable sort of person. And we're very lucky this season, actually, that there's actually been no bad eggs. You know, no sort of people who sort of have an ego about them. It's a really, really good dressing room to work with, and for the players to be around every single time. And there's so many I can mention, but Reece really sticks out in terms of that, because he's just just really, it just always goes above and beyond what he has to do. And if there's ever anything he has to do in the community or anything, he happily accepts it and will do it with a smile on his face. And he's just a great person for that reason.
How about quality?
Quality?
Best players.
Easy, actually. The way he could just turn a game and make us win, it'd have to be David McGoldrick. 100%. Because there were just times, I remember during those times, it was, we wouldn't be playing very well, and then David would just sort of wake up, he'd drop into midfield, pick up the ball, run with it, bring us all the way up the pitch, and then he'll get a goal. And I don't think there's I mean, we talk about Callum Wilson, but I don't think he ever almost changed the game. Could change the game on his own. He might need the help of others around him, which was brilliant with him and Leon. And when we had Leon up front and them two, it was fantastic to watch. Obviously, the biggest annoyance is that they were never really watched by Coventry because obviously we were at Northampton at the time, and it's really pretty shit that was the season. But that we had to apparently move to Northampton because Wilson and Leon that season were devastating to watch. And obviously I know that Paul and Joey obviously went in games against Peterborough and Bristol, like the most entertained they've ever been, like most nervous, like watching games like that, but it was incredible. But yeah, for me, David McGoldrick would have to be the star man, really, because I just loved the way he played. And some of the goals he scored, the one at Stevenage in the last minute, where he tips the keeper, I still watch that now. That's gorgeous. That's unbelievable. What a game, like scoring 3 goals in the last, was it 5 minutes? No, scoring 2 goals in the last 5 minutes to turn it around. It was, and that period as well. I think we went to Doncaster a week before that and won 4-1. We beat Warsaw 5-1 at the Rico. We went 13 games unbeaten. Thought this team are going places. We're going in the, typical Cov, get a 10-point deduction, manager leaves, and then you're thinking, we might get relegated here. But good times.
This is one of the videos that I've watched most frequently of all Cov videos ever. It's the 2013 December Goal of the Month competition.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Frank in there. Yeah. Frank.
It's got 16 goals in it, and some of the ones, and just saying them, you'll remember most of these. The ones that stick out are, there's 2 McGoldrick against Walsall. There's Cyrus Christie's against Walsall, where he shows it behind himself and hits it with his left foot.
Yeah. That was cool.
Moose's against Doncaster. Adam Barton's against Doncaster.
That was beautiful. That side foot.
Beauty.
Actually, I must admit though, I liked in the Doncaster game, even though it was actually just probably not aesthetically the best goal. The third goal when David McGoldrick scores a tap in at the far post, the actual whole move of that, I think it was 3 passes from the start of the pitch to the end of it. And Jordan Clark, yep. Rasping cross was unbelievable, and you just thought, this team is incredible. Like, is this actually happening? Unbelievable. I think did we score 5 at Hartlepool that month as well? Or was that just before?
No, that was just before.
Yeah, and that was incredible as well. And Carl Baker scored a few, and there were some screamers in that. There were some really good goals in that as well. That was Blair Adams' debut, of course, and you just thought, we've got a real left back for once, because we had that Tripe. What was he called? Jamie Record before that. He was awesome. Unbelievable, Christ. Yeah. Actually, I tell you what, he's a no Mike Lawrence and Christ. They could go to town together.
The final one of those goals, goal N, is the McGoldrick against Stevenage.
Oh, it was just a great moment. I almost smashed my laptop because I just got up to celebrate, but there was no tables at Stevenage, so I forgot the laptop was on my lap, and so I jumped up, and so the laptop flew into the air, like 6 feet into the air, and then I realised, oh no, the laptop. And it was going to crash down, and somehow caught it with one hand before it crashed down into the dugout area. And my boss was looking at me at the time, thinking, "We don't have a grand to spend at the football club, and you just always smash the grand." But it would have been worth it, to be fair.
What about games? So, what games have stood out? Particularly bad, particularly good?
I was asked this yesterday by Tony. Actually, the worst one was Oldham away last season.
4-1.
The 4-1.
Yeah,
were you there? Did you go?
Yeah, that came up in conversation yesterday considerably.
The whole day, because we got there 15. It was the only time it ever really sort of happened. We usually get there 2 hours before the ground, set up, ready for team news at the hour before kickoff. I got there 15 minutes before. The coach was delayed as well. And then if you actually look at the team, we've had a very, very young Madison starting up from Shaw Miller, which just reeked of desperation. Absolutely smelled of it. I even said that. So I'm like, what are we doing here? And then we had Seb Hines at the back. Like, his ankles are shot. Don't know how he's playing with Kaka at the moment, but awful, really. And 4 goals we conceded. You're like, it was horrendous. And the worst part about it was Andy Webster was captain that night. And so when you have a bad defeat, right, you've got to have a player who's got to go up and stand to the press, and that is generally the captain. Now, me and Andy never got on. We actually had a few arguments quite over time, and so I had to try and convince him after a 4-1 defeat, basically not shouting at him, but sort of, Andy, you're not getting away from me. You've got to go and do this. It was just an awful day. Just awful. It was really cold as well, wasn't it? That's got to be the worst.
Very cold. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be up there with the worst one. I think best one, Carlisle away, 4-0. It was an absolute destruction of a team. I thought we were just excellent. You know, Billy Daniels scored. It's a shame to see where his career's gone to, by the way. I really had high hopes for him. I thought he was really quite good at the time, especially against Arsenal, actually, as well. He was probably
he was lovely in there, yeah. Passing the ball like a madman, wasn't he? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And Barnsley away in the FA Cup as well. It was excellent. That you just think, well, you're sitting on the bench for an eating now. What's gone wrong there? But I think that one sticks out. And then obviously this year, Millwall away. It was just so good. And I was looking, I was focused on doing the wall, so I was just typing into there. And obviously we used to have Matt with us at the football club, and then I see the tweet pop up on when the third goal goes in, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack, 3-0. And I'm sort of thinking, well, that's a bit, maybe Matt should calm down a bit. I turn towards Matt, he's grabbing his chest going, Kieran, I'm in trouble. He's genuinely, like, because the shock of what was happening was quite incredible. Like. The fourth goal in that game as well. I know there's some Adam Armstrong's goal and like Ruben's no-look pass, but the move as well, the little touch from Marcus Tudguy back into Jim O'Brien's path, was absolutely excellent. And hearing your fucking shit all the way around because it was a really good atmosphere as well. Before we scored, the atmosphere it was the Den at its best. I love going to the Den when it's really loud, and so it was just excellent away day.
I thought the other thing with that game was that they really tried to kick the shit out of us that day and just didn't work at all. And the second thing, and I think why the fourth goal I felt was so special, was I felt that they had put 30-35 minutes worth of meaningful attacking threat against us, that we defended impeccably. That they really did give it a good go, and they looked like a half-decent team, but we were absolutely resolute. And then that fourth goal was just the icing on the cake, where it was like, yeah, you give it a go, and you hadn't got a chance. But I tried to think about that game too
after that game, you looked at them, you looked at Reader, and you thought Millwall will be one of the best, teams in terms of what this league could throw at us. And I know it was only 2 games in, but we saw the Wigan game before that. I remember speaking to Matt saying, "There's absolutely no way we can't go up this year. This team, there's absolutely no way it can't happen.
Don't get me started.
It's far too good." And then the injuries strike, and then we all know what happened. And it's so disappointing the way it panned out, of course. And just to be 5 points off the playoffs, and you can just make them up so easy. It's like. I remember last season, actually. I think we finished 13 points off the playoffs, and we just about survived relegation. But people were genuinely sort of going, you could make up that 13 points, certain moments, which total bollocks, obviously. But 5 points, when Marcus Tudguy hit the bar at Gillingham, there's your 2 points there, which should be
Score your penalties.
Yeah, score your penalties, for Christ's sake. Help yourself.
You can do that, can't you? And then you can say, well, if the Millwall player doesn't headbutt Ramirez, we probably don't win 4 of the last 5, and I thought that exactly. I thought that after the Bradford game, it was like, what if? And then it's like, well, these things, and it isn't red cards and even themselves out. It's just you miss chances. We're remembering Tudguy missing a chance, and there's probably other games earlier in the season where teams missed. I think Bradford missed an absolute sitter from 3 yards out when the guy put it wide, and his teammate looked to him and just went, how the fuck did you miss that?
Yeah.
We should have scored 5 goals a game, though, in those early games. It was too easy for us.
And I think, actually, the game just after that in the Carling Cup, when we actually sort of played, not a second string, but we played like players like Bryn Morris came in, and like Rochdale, as we always know now, like following League One, is always a difficult place to go, even though you wouldn't think so. But to get a result of Rochdale on Tuesday night, you'd be doing well. And obviously, we didn't win the game. We obviously lost on penalties, but that performance that night, I was thinking, well, if our second string can get what is a draw at Rochdale, it was even impounding it more in my mind that we were going up. I just remembered another game, actually, Tranmere at Northampton. We lost 5-1. They had like 6. I genuinely was looking around thinking, what are we doing here? Like, this is just ridiculous.
This is going to sound crazy, but this is a game that comes up on the pod quite often. I didn't mind that.
I didn't mind. I know what you're going to say, because they only had 6 shots or something.
what's his name? Ryan
Lowe.
Ryan Lowe.
Yeah.
He just who had clearly had a magic lamp that morning. There was one goal one goal was crazy that he'd scored from distance, but that he had no right to.
It was like an overhead kick volley, wasn't it? And he must be so annoyed looking around and going, "Shit, no one's here. No one's going to watch this." It
was the worst performing 5-1 win that I've ever seen a team pull off. It was just, I'm sure me and Paul, both of us, walked out of that and just said, some games that are just freak games that you can't really be too annoyed about."
I suppose so that stuck in the mind when we beat Bury 6-0, didn't it? And I just came out and was like, that doesn't mean anything. We've won 6-0, we've had 7 shots.
Yeah.
And it was a great feeling.
And they were truly awful.
Yeah.
I mean, Reece Brown proving exactly why. I can't believe he's actually still at this level of football. Like, it was awful that day. It was completely dreadful. I mean, that's a football club in a lot of trouble. Bury, of course, now, because obviously they're going to fire sale all their players, basically. I'd love to see Leon back at Cov. I would. I think that'd be a good thing to happen.
Do you think Mowbray would go for it?
I think he's thinking about it. I think the option, not the. When I say the option was there last season, it wasn't really, but it was talked about. That we knew he was released, we knew he was free and available, and you could tell Tony was thinking it over. I think now, you see him this season. Obviously, scored 2 goals against us. He's just got the scoring touch at this level, and I think the stats just back him up. He's not a great person really to have around. He's got issues. He's a nice enough lad, but you just can't read him. So the biggest encapsulation of Liam Clark when he scored 2 goals at Bramwell Lane and the Sheffield United win, and basically quite near the time he came in, it came out to me and I went, "Oh, Leon Sky wants to speak to you," and he went, "Man, don't do press, get me," and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Man, don't do press." Looked at Nathan Cameron and went, "Man thinks I'm doing press." I'm like, what are you doing, like? And so then I went out and went up to Mark Robbins and said, he's just spoke to me, like, Mark Robbins pulled him off the coach and sort of made him do press. Then, 2 weeks later, not even 2, that's about a month later, at Carlisle, he's captained the team, but he hasn't scored a goal. And so the press haven't asked to speak to him. And so he comes out and goes, with his top button up, going, "I'll do press." And I was like, "But they haven't asked to speak to you?" And then he looks at me and goes, "But I'm doing press." And so I just have to bring him out. And the press are looking at him going, and I'm just going, interview him for Christ's sake. And that's Leon Clark. You didn't know what you were going to get.
Do you think Mowbray's going to have a different approach this season to his transfer
it's definitely
policy?
To the transfer policy, yeah, 100%. I think the contracts.
Do you think he... But also, do you think... just think about it and sort of looking at the way the signings he made. Most of the signings he made, full-time signings, were older players. And obviously he gambled on a lot of youth players. And I found it very interesting, we discussed this on the pod, that he comes out and goes, I'm new to this level, and Armstrong's a 19-year-old lad, and it's like, well, if you're in the Championship, would you base all your goals on a 19-year-old lad? The answer to that question would still be no. And I find just thinking about, you go through the retain list, and there's, he's bought in 13 permanent signings, and he's only really retaining 4 or 5 of those. One of those being, Winslow, I think we all agree, has been a great signing. Ruben Ramirez, I don't know what your opinions on him are.
I think
I don't even know what Mowbray's opinions on him are. So.
I think there's a feeling within the building that he's done enough to be good this season. I know what you mean. I think the fans love him much more than he deserves. I don't think it affects the game as much as he should do, and I don't think he his head just seems to go sometimes. He doesn't seem to want it enough at points in the season. When we needed him most, he wasn't there, and then the next week he'd be pulling out worldies, and you think, well, come on, Ruben, let's do this every single week. But I think the value in him having that 2-year deal as a young pro, in that money in his contract, I think is more than enough. But he needs to give a lot more next season, because if he doesn't succeed here as a footballer, I'm going to struggle to see him going down to League 2 and doing any better, because it's so much more physical down at that level. And so he can't cope with that side of the game. The only way he's ever going to progress if he goes up immediately, really, and he needs a massive season next year to make sure that happens.
Can I give you one reason why I think there is a perceived love for Ruben Ramirez? That perceived love comes from the Sheffield United game, where I think everyone agreed he was man of the match, and the next game he got dropped. And it was almost like no one could understand it. And I'm sure Moby has his reasons, and I'm sure they're very good reasons. But from a purely fan point of view, when you watch a guy have that good a game, and then to be dropped the next week, you feel like, well, what's he actually got to do to retain his place in the team? Yeah. Because surely, and we discussed this a lot, young players need 5, 10, 15, 20 games, build up a head of steam. They're going to have bad games.
Yeah.
I think fans will accept players after their bad game. Again, it's how they respond. For him, it was a case of, he was brilliant, and then he was dropped. And it was almost like, you wonder what's going through his head. He must be thinking, it almost doesn't matter how well I play, I might not make the team. And the whole point of football is, if you play well, you retain your shirt.
I think you're right. Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. He was great that day against Sheffield, and I do remember I think, did we have a break after the Sheffield game? Was that when we had that weekend off or something, and we came back and was that straight after it? It was going into obviously the Christmas period, and James Maddison sort of came back into the reckoning, and it was almost like that was forgotten about. I do agree with that completely, and then his head's going to roll a little bit, I suppose, isn't it? So, yeah, but. The biggest frustration as well, if you think about the link-up play between James Maddison and Ruben Ramirez in those first games, it was unbelievable. I've never seen... They're just straight away telepathic, and Maddison didn't get injured then, and we had him for a couple more games. Look, we're going back down this path, aren't we? But, so, yeah.
I still feel like we'd have signed Stephen Hunt.
Back on the transfer policy, it is going to change this year. I would say what I would expect is Tony has recognised that he would probably need more players who know the level, who are based in the level, and who are not just players on their... So Sheffield United have done this really badly this season. They've signed obviously players like Connor Salmon and players on their way down the leagues rather than going up them. Whereas Tony has recognised now he wants to get players who obviously either know the level, who he thinks will be given a good chance at the level, and is around the ages of like 23 up to like 28, with the odd player sort of pushing past that for like the experience.
So, as I said, having looked at it, I mean, the amount of over 30s, most of the 13 permanent signings were players who were coming to the end of their career.
Yeah.
And the loan signings are all kids, which is fine. I think you're going to always sort of bank you're not going to sign a loan who's like 35 unless they're suddenly having a brilliant season in League Two and you think, wow, I can take them. Do you think Moby just underestimated a bit League One and just thought I can get out of it with these older players and these kids? And
I think in a way, it was almost like he was trying to stick to what he knows. In a way, I think Jody Jones has probably been a big sort of realization for him in a way, because he's had a lot of players obviously from Premier League football clubs, and sort of they've came down and sort of affected it in certain ways, but I think Jody Jones, for an impact and you just look at him as a footballer, you think he is by far the best talent we've had at the football club this season. And I watch him in training, you think, and he's just he doesn't have to do much with the ball to get past players. It's quite unbelievable the way he can just surge away from players and just fight. And so he's looking at this player and he's going, well, he came from Dagenham and Redbridge and was in Sunday League football up until the age of 14, and yet he's probably the best player we've seen around here so far. So I think what you're going to see from him during the pre-season and during the next season as well, there'll be a lot more players who will be coming into the club who will be either from this level. He will dip into those, obviously the Premier League football clubs to get the odd lone player in, but he doesn't want to use them to. So last summer we used those players to build the quality in our squad, whereas because he didn't believe the quality existed at this level to bring in as a contract, as a permanent signing. But I think Jody Jones has shown him that actually those players do exist, and that is now going to be the consensus, that instead we're going to maybe use those loans to complement those players we're going to bring in on permanent contracts.
I'm treated like that then. That's kind of my biggest thing, is where there's become this sort of mindset now where, it's because of the loans, we haven't achieved this season because of the loans, when actually, like you say, that the loans created that quality. So the one thing I don't want to see is just bringing in players on permanent contracts, and this idea. And this isn't criticising what you've just said. This is just my thoughts, where I feel like a lot of fans have this idea that someone coming in on permanent is by default a better signing than a loan player. that can't be the case. We need to get, every single signing has to be meaningful and has to sort of complement the whole squad. And I think people get very sort of focused on this black and white. Well, they've got to be our own players now. You've got to be our own players. But there's a risk there. You're committing yourself to a player who potentially is not as good as a loan player. So as long as we've got that balance again, maybe not quite as extreme as having 7 loanees as we had this year, or however many we had. But we just can't be as black and white in our thinking as a lot of our fans want us to be.
Well, I'm also glad that we had this discussion last time on, Kieran, and it did really annoy me. This Blair Cargill came from Bournemouth, who was basically 3 years ago were a League One club, because he was a Premier League centre half who's played under 21s in the Premier League level. He was automatically valuable as a first team player, while Jody Jones, with his 40 games at League Two level, was sort of dismissed as being, well, it's only at League Two level. And I know I've watched a lot more League One football than Tony Mowbray has, by the sounds of it. There are quality players throughout the division and divisions. I think it's just a case of, it's almost, you should never dismiss someone from where they've come from. They can't, to some extent, they can't help where they've been developed. It's where they end up, which is important. And you can see, well, we've all watched players this season. You thought that player's very, very good. Like that kid, the left back at Walsall. He's starting off at Walsall.
Walsall's the biggest example there. I think Tony's watched a lot of Walsall this year in terms of because obviously we're very local to them, so he'll go off and watch Walsall when we haven't got a game on to see the opposition sometimes, or if we're playing Walsall the next week or whatever. And it's been an eye-opener really for him to watch Walsall, because they've got a group of lads really who were cast-offs from other football clubs, and they've spent so much time together, like Sam Manton, Paul Downing, Romain Sawyers. They've spent so much time together over the last 3 years. It's basically been the same team. They've developed so much, and now they're the vast majority of them are excellent footballers. For me, they're the team of the season. I know Wigan's won the league and they're only third, but I think on their day they're the best team in the league. I think Wigan sort of doesn't make the landscape fair, really, because they went out in January and brought a whole new football team and went and brought basically everyone's best player and put them all together again, and then they kicked on again, whilst Walsall have just stuck with the same team throughout the season, and they've been brilliant. They've been absolutely excellent.
Sawyer's brilliant. I love
Sawyer's is quality. Tony put him as the best player in the league on the PFA votes. That's what he has shown Tony in a way. He's like, well, that's what I want. That's the vision where I've got a player. Every single player in the team can take the ball and spit turn and sort of pass it, and that's what he wants to build, and so that's what he wants to create. And so that sort of Walsall model, you might see the club go towards that and give the longer contracts out to make sure that the players are staying around each other for a long enough time to build an understanding, which will eventually get the team out of the league.
I mean, that's basically, just looking through the site, I think that's my biggest bugbear, or one of my biggest bugbears. And it's the talk about progression and the fact that you look at the team, and in terms of progression, there's only really Vincelow, Reece Charles Cook and Stokes, who are, even if we retain Sam Ricketts, are players who have played a lot of games this season and who are going in next season looking like their first choice. And I know the budgets are all stretched, but I feel like Moby sort of gambled on getting loans in, getting older players in, and thought he could get out of League One that way. And, there's no denying, the first 18 games we were brilliant when we were top. Yeah. And no one's arguing with that. But there was a point where you could see that we didn't have any middle ground. And the next 23 games after they were awful. Like, I think if you break the season up, in our best spell, the first 18 games, the last 5 games, we got 49 points. The 23 games in the middle, we got 20. And it was that, in that spell there, Bradford got like 45 or, that's where those sort of teams just knew what they were doing because they had the players who were in the right age group, who weren't burning out because they were too old or too young or hitting the wall. They managed to just sort of play through it. And, that was the frustrating thing at that time, is we seemed to be rotating so much. We seemed to be sort of throwing enough shit at the fan and hoping, or throwing enough shit at the wall and hoping we were going to get a brilliant painting out of it. And it just looked so unorganised for a spell.
Should have still worked.
Huh?
Should have still worked. A lot of it. I'd still maintain the players are more good enough to have won more games the second half of the season than they did. Even if we say we have problems with loans and sort of age and things like that, they didn't play to their capabilities in, and so I don't think.
Well, going to throw this stat out there. After 27 games, we had 48 points. We were 18 points ahead of Barnsley. We were 14 points above Rochdale. And we were 16 points above Scunthorpe. And then after that, we only needed another, 26 points in 19 games to get in the playoffs?
Yep.
And I know we discussed this last time. Does Moby take some responsibility for that? Does Moby feel like he made mistakes, or does he just think it was circumstance?
No, he does, yeah. He's done a lot of self-reflecting in a way, and he's always tried to look at the reasons for it, really. And it's a difficult one. There's so many reasons, but I think the one major one would probably be the sale of James Maddison, actually, because if he wasn't sold, and obviously the club had to sell him, obviously that move had to happen in a way, but if he wasn't sold, this is the best reason I can sort of come up with why the season failed, is because he took up a loan space, which meant he had to come back as part of the deal. That was in the deal. So he took up a loan space. The club were wanting to use that loan space, really, to bring in another striker, because there's a realisation that Adam might not be able to provide all the goals throughout the season. Then that loan space was taken up and that striker couldn't come in. Now, I know who that striker was in my mind. I don't want to say it here because obviously, but that striker would have scored goals if he came in, and he would have refreshed it, and Adam would have been able to take a break, and quite possibly, whilst we wouldn't have been as brilliant as we were in the first half of the season, we would have picked up points and we would have scored goals. And for me, that's probably the biggest reason why this season didn't pan out the way it should have.
Can I just ask you said we had to sell Maddison. Why now? Why do we have to sell him in January and not wait till the summer?
Good question. The club needs the money. Quite simply, the club is dependent on those sort of situations in a way, and the budget has to be fulfilled, and the budget was set at the start of the season, and as you've probably seen from Chris, the budget wasn't really met through what we'd looked for through ticket revenues and stuff, and we didn't get to where we were because of the season tickets was probably slightly priced too cheap on the reflection, even though it was exactly the right thing to do at the time. And so the budget wasn't made up of the money we needed, so there was a shortfall there, and so then the money had to be made up in that. And then the other side of that coin as well is that it's Norwich City, it's a Premier League football club, and it was a big move for the player.
And like you say, financially for him, it sets him up for
life. Yeah, and it's for his whole family. It's gonna change the way he lives, and you couldn't reject it for him. Really, you couldn't turn that down. So that's why it really had to happen there and then. Really,
I think the interesting, and this is a purely devil's advocate thing, because I don't think I'm fully behind this, but I think it's an interesting point to think about, is that let's suppose that his performances in the second half of the season were only motivated by that move to a factor. I think it's impossible. It's plausible that his performances could have dropped off in the way that they did do just because of his age or because of fitness or whatever. If he hadn't have been sold in January, would we get as much for him now as if we would have sold him in January? And I would say 100% not.
I think you're right.
I think people like Maddison, we've known about Maddison since he was 14. I think clubs have been looking at Maddison for a long, long time.
Yeah.
I don't think, in the same way as I don't think anyone made their opinion on John Fleck regarding the Oldham game, I don't think anyone's made their opinion on James Maddison.
Yeah.
Based on probably not even this season. I think the teams have been circling over James Maddison for a long time, and it was always going to be a matter of when, not if. I mean,
teams are waiting on James Maddison, basically. Every team watched him during the under-18s, and every single scout would have said, wow, this player has talent, but will he make it in a man's game because of the way he looks? And then as soon as he went into our first team, and people realised, he can cope with it, he can cope with the physicality, in fact, he used it to his advantage, that's when everyone started getting excited. And then that's when you had all the Premier League clubs queuing up to sign him.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily... I think we've talked about James Maddison and whatever else. Do we have anything especially urgent or anything that we want to get off our chests before we enter the glorious sunshine that is the close season? That sounds like a no to me. So, firstly, thank you everyone that's listened over this last season. It's been an up and down, topsy-turvy roller coaster cliche ride through 10 months or so.
No, it's been a roller coaster up, then a dramatic crash, followed by a little bit up back to the train station at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might have taken you all season, but that is a good analogy.
What do you mean all season?
Secondly, thank you to you, Paul, and you, Neil.
Cheers, bro.
Thank you, Joe.
And then thank you one final time to Kieran, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Good luck,
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here, and really upset to be leaving, but I'll definitely be coming back next season, so it'll be brilliant.
All the best. Play out Sky Blues. Bye!